Good afternoon, my friends, and how's everyone doing today? I should say my peeps. I've even got my peeps shirt on, chilling with my peeps. I wanted to do a video today, just a brief video, and talk a little bit about climate change. Oh, those words, as soon as you bring them up, uh, some people, get quite riled up about climate change, and today is the global climate strike, is what they're calling it. And I as I'm sitting here sipping my cup of coffee, which was hopefully fair traded and sustainably harvested and all this and all that and gluten free, and you know the whole story. First off, I realize that humans are doing a lot to try to improve their future. And not just their future, but a future for their children. And it's a difficult discussion to have because there's so many angles to this, but I want to try to get as much as I can in. First off, the climate strike today is supposedly there are millions of people in these strikes, and in New York alone, they're letting like a million kids, giving them the freedom to go to the strike if they so choose. And a lot of people scoff at this, and they say, "Oh, what a waste of time." There's a certain part of me that says, of course, I believe her name's Greta Thunberg or Thunberg. She's the one who's leading this climate march, and she took a boat over from Europe, and now she's gonna supposedly speak at this march in New York. And she's like this 15-year-old girl. I think she has Asperger's, if I'm not mistaken. And she's made this her life mission to stop using fossil fuels, to get other people to, and to basically to preserve the future for children. And there's a part of me that can't help but say, kid, you've got a long way to go before you understand, the bigger picture of what's going on. But there's also part of me that says, yeah, she's right, of course. You know, it's just as you get older, you realize the complicated nature of people changing their ways. Not that we can't change our ways, but that there is just so much argument against it, it's almost easier to give up sometimes. So a lot of adults have just given up on even talking about it. And this is what the media has done over the last 20 years. The media should be absolutely ashamed. Even when there are major floods going on or huge storms, they just do not talk about climate change. In fact, I read an article that they gave 40 times more coverage to the not Jenner, but the other one with the Kardashians one year than they did anything having to do with the climate. And it's a couple of reasons. First off, it comes down from those on top. If you're not aware, most of the medias are conglomerates, and they're all in bed with the fossil fuel companies who basically pay them to just not talk about these certain things or to give them a favorable view. They've been doing this for a long time with pharmaceuticals. They did the same thing with cigarettes. Um, it's not conspiracy, it's business. It's just how people operate. And but there's also another side to it. And it's because, and this is, I think, the bigger side than the money itself. This is, I think it was Charlie Rose was asked once why he didn't interview someone about, the climate or whatnot. Or maybe this was about politics. Anyway, it was about some subject that he was going to interview someone on. And he said, well, it comes down from the higher up. We're told, basically what we can and can't talk about. And this is the same for all media. So, but it's not just about money that's coming in to keep them quiet. What it comes down to is us, the viewers, the ratings. They found that shows that deal with climate change on the media, their points drop and their viewership drops significantly. So it's down to the people not wanting to watch it. It's depressing. People don't want to hear about what might happen in 50 years from now, because that's a long ways away, even 30 years from now. But guess what? When I was 15 years old and I first heard about this shit, I thought 30 years seemed like a long way, but here I am 30 years later. And, I'm not one of those gung-ho, go forward, go vegan, stop driving cars kind of people. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to live it reasonably comfortable, but I'm going to do my best to minimize my impact and my carbon footprint. But I also realize that, the major corporations, even just the tour boats, and vacation boats and shipping industry pollutes far more than any one of us do, of course. And that's one of the frustrating things, is that the blame is always put on the people. Like, it's your fault. You know, you should stop eating meat. You should stop driving. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. Do we need to? Yes, but we're all stuck in this way of life. It's like we've built this house of cards. It's going to tumble. There's no way that we can continue living this way. And it's like a lot of folks say, well, humans will make it through. We'll survive. And you know what? They're probably right. But we won't all survive. If we're going to see a huge population decline at one time or another, and that's just sad. You know, it's sad to think that so many people will suffer, and that we're already going through water crisis, shortages, flooding, people being displaced from their homes. If you think the migration crisis is bad now, you just wait until we start running out of water. And we have to look at, in my opinion, look at the world differently. We really have to stop, and this is why I believe in nations and protecting themselves. I believe in individuals protecting themselves. But I also believe in looking at the bigger picture and realizing that we all breathe this air, that we all share this climate, and we all share these oceans. What one nation does, the others suffer because of. But let me just tell you another thing that the media will never tell you, and probably have never even mentioned. When they talk about how much U.S. pollutes compared to other countries, for example, or how much the populations pollute, you know what is not included in that? Is the military. And the military accounts for 20% of the entire emissions of the whole country. They have billions of dollars worth of oil being burned just for, jets, testing missiles, and for a whole variety of things. But it's not just that. You might not know this, but I believe something around 9,000 of the Superfund sites in this country, which are sites that are considered very toxic and they need government funding to clean up, thousands of them are from military bases and military facilities where they manufactured, whether it be rockets, rocket fuel, propulsion systems, nerve gas, chemicals, just out east of here. And I filmed it a few days ago. I forgot to post it, but I was just stopped on the freeway and I was making a little video of my travels, and there's this one area in eastern Washington where there's just mounds for miles and miles. These mounds are spread out maybe less than a quarter mile apart. I can't tell, it's kind of far away. But there's hundreds of them, and they are spread out over many square miles. And each one of those mounds has a little storage area underground that is full of everything from mustard gas to VX nerve gas and agents to probably nuclear waste. We've got Hanford right over there, so there's tons of waste all over in eastern Washington. And nobody ever talks about that either, of course, but the issue goes beyond just the pollution. It's where the pollution comes from, and that the U.S. military pollutes more than some of the larger countries, or some of the more Western countries, more than Poland, I think more than Sweden. And it's not, that's the scary part, it's not just emissions, it's toxic compounds. So my point being that if we're ever going to stop this, it's not going to, if we're ever going to, I should say, ease climate change. And I should say this first, before I go any further. There's one of the biggest debates around this is the fact that a lot of folks say, well, the Earth changes and goes through climate change anyway, and it's a natural process. That's correct. I've looked at the actual statistics as best I can see to try to understand the various different types of carbon and the footprints of carbon and how much more there is in the atmosphere than there was before. And I've come to my own conclusion that the Earth is going through a cycle of change, but we are contributing to it immensely. And often after these major warming periods is an ice age, because the currents stagnate in the oceans. And so when people say, well, we're not even getting colder, it'll get colder eventually, we'll hit an ice age, is that any better? But here's the thing I want to say, and this is the main point here. I don't believe that we can stop this. I don't believe that we can change the major upheavals that will happen in the future. But I do believe that we can minimize the impact by minimizing our use of carbon and fossil fuels. I also believe that Even if climate was completely out of the picture, let's just say our CO2 emissions, it was totally irrelevant to the climate. We found out that the Earth could take care of itself. All the CO2 disappeared, and we were fine, and we could continue to drive our cars. If you haven't seen some of the most polluted cities in the world, like Delhi, in India, is just horrible. China, who we have always said is the major polluter, is actually cleaning up their act, and they're going to more renewables only because they see a future where they're going to have to use them. And to be energy independent, you're going to want to be able to utilize the sun, water, and even nuclear in a lot of cases. And I won't get into that because it's a completely different discussion, but I do support clean nuclear if it can be done. But there's too much doubt cast on it at this point to where it'll be taken seriously in most instances. I'd like to say windmills will save us, but they don't. Did you know that there's a gas used for insulating the electronics and wires that's used in these giant windmills? And this gas is something like 35,000 times more of a greenhouse gas than CO2. And generally it's contained within the unit, but if it leaks, it's actually much worse. It's a very small amount that's added to the atmosphere, but it actually can last for thousands of years. It takes a lot longer. It's really hard to win. It's not just that, but the rare earth magnets that we use to make these windmills are mined in China, and the byproduct are these pits of basically this radioactive sludge. And we want to think that it's clean. We want to think that these things are clean, just like solar panels being produced. There are a lot of fossil fuels used to produce them, and in transportation. But these are the excuses that are used to not even try. The fact that we're stuck, and what I just gave you the examples of what people use as the ammunition to say, well, we shouldn't bother. It's already too far gone. We're going to be screwed anyway. Well, we'll run out of oil. We might as well use it up while we can. Well, it's just the way the world works, or even the worst one, which is, well, God will take care of it. I'd like to see us take responsibility for our part of it as humans, but also put the blame where the blame belongs. And if the media wasn't so irresponsible, they would have called out, these corporations and these organizations and the military a long time ago. And the people, if they actually saw what was going on, they might do something about it, but maybe not. Maybe they'd march in the streets by the millions like they're doing today. But maybe that would have an impact, or not. The fact that the media has to talk about it is one of those things where, hey, at least it's making people aware, hopefully. Fortunately, trust in the media has gone down significantly, and it's under 20%, I believe, now for television media. And but that still means that 20% of the people actually trust those fuckers. Pardon my language. They're full of it. They're full of it. There's so much propaganda being spewed on mainstream media. The result was alternative media, which got just as bad. It was like this direct response. And I'll tell you, MSNBC to me is a complete joke. Like CNN, all these liberal channels have just they haven't redeemed themselves. And I actually, it's just sad, because I'd hoped that they could actually start getting into important issues, but I should have known better. Meanwhile, any right-wing channels, or if you'd say, let's just say Fox, for example, I came across an article when I looked up the thing about the march today. And I was just flipping through some news headlines, and one of them said, 5 facts you don't know about the climate protest, or the climate strike is what they call it. And I was like, oh great, here we go. And 2 out of the 5 were just talking shit about that one girl, that 15-year-old girl, Greta. One said, well, her trip across the Atlantic actually used more fossil fuels because of these flights for this and that. And the next one talked about how teachers were against it. A lot of teachers were saying kids shouldn't take time off of school for this. And what did they say? Kids shouldn't do this, or they might start thinking they can use it to leave school to protest other things. And I thought, these are the best arguments that they could come up against people out in the street standing up for what they believe in. Now look, I might have mixed feelings about the impact it has. But the fact is, we need to change our way of life. We need to do it quickly, not just so we can avoid this 1.5 degree change in climate, but so we can stop choking on pollution, so our fish can stop dying in the waterways, So next time the military spills 94,000 gallons of jet fuel into a waterway right next to the river by the ocean, it's actually on the news instead of the locals knowing nothing about it. And these things happen all the time. It's considered national security. They don't talk about it, and nobody hears anything about it. They don't want people to panic, because if people knew how dire the situation really was, there might be, they might be less likely to go along with the propaganda. But there's another side of it I have to mention before I go, which is that no matter how good scientists are, no matter how good climate scientists are, they still don't really know what's going to happen. And that's a mystery. But if we look around what's going on, and you trust even some of the experts, you can say, well, maybe I can just use my own eyeballs to see, you know, the pollution in the air that you can visibly see in the cities, and maybe we could at least start with curbing that a little bit. But instead, we're eliminating EPA regulations, signing bills to allow the waterways to be polluted again. We're going backwards as a nation. And at one time, the U.S. led as an innovator and as an example. Regardless of the wars we were in, at least we were making an effort to be good people. And now it just seems like we're going along with, yeah, let's destroy our own environment. You know, it's pretty sad. It's pathetic, actually. But anyway, thanks for listening. Let me know what you think about all this. I'm not trying to be grim. It's one of the things, we have to be positive. We have to look to the future with positivity, because it's like even that little girl said, she's like, I don't want people to look and have hope. I want them to be scared. I'm like, dude, that's some bullshit right there. People need to have hope. They need to move forward. I don't know if that was the exact words, but I just remember thinking, no. That's a grim outlook. I don't share a lot of these angry, a lot of protesters are very angry. And I'm talking about the extreme ones that just want to protest everything. It's unhealthy to be angry at your fellow man, say to the point where you can yell at someone for eating a piece of meat because you're a vegan. The identity politics bullshit just has to stop. Or to where you can, put someone down because they have a car that's bigger than yours, and it pollutes more. Sometimes things are more complicated than they seem. And some of these same people who are complaining are the ones that lease a new car every year, right? Not always. I'm just, there's a lot of examples of just hypocrisy throughout the whole, not only the community of people who support, legislation to remove protection on the environment, but those who want to protect every little single thing comes at the cost of others' income. And so farmers are like, hey, I'm not going to lose out on this. Or, people who own a small piece of land and want to mine for a particular mineral, but it's a protected land. It's important we put ourselves in the shoes of the people who have to deal with this, deal with the issues. So that's what I think. And I don't think we do that often enough. So that also means putting yourself in the shoes of people who live on the coastlines in places where they don't even have really any technology there, and yet they're going to suffer the consequences of devastating flooding over the coming decades. It doesn't mean that we're going to have, I guess you might call it national guilt. It might be like the new white guilt is like national guilt. Like, oh God, look what the U.S. did to the world. No, it's not like that. It's just humans. Human nature crosses all borders, and when a country finds a way to expand, they expand. And I don't think we'll ever stop until we're stopped. But hopefully I'm wrong. Maybe we're smarter than I think. I'd like to think so. Be well, my friends. Take care.